The further upright you are, the more lats you're going to be using, and then the further back you lean, the more like mid back and stuff is going to be emphasized as well. So I kind of like a 30-degree lean, because then you get a bunch of muscles in the back, but you also hit the lats to a maximum degree. Now you really just want to be controlling it and getting that full range of motion. Hey guys, today I am going to be focusing entirely on form for back movements. So I'm going to be primarily discussing row variations, the horizontal kind, and then also some vertical pulls as well. So we get a little bit of both sides of the coin. Because I think that back movements and the form regarding back training is very, very misunderstood, unfortunately. A lot of people think that you can't round your back or extend it on various movements, but that is just not the case, because the erector spinae, the muscles lining your spine, are specifically for that purpose. Of course, you don't want to go overboard and like max out with a rounded back on deadlifts or something, because that's just not what that movement is for. You're not supposed to be rounding your back to a large degree, especially under tremendous loads. However, I think that in terms of a lot of other movements, you could totally be rounding your back and using the back as it should. And I think that the back is like any other muscle group, and you should be taking it really through its full range of motion. So let's start with some rows, horizontal pulls. And I'm just going to demonstrate something before I get into my first working sets. And this is kind of, first of all, you could do a row where you're hinging at the hip here with two dumbbells and going like this. And this would be a great form of a row. A lot of people overlook this. And of course, this could be substituted with a barbell or a Smith machine. This would just be a bent over row. The only issue that I have with this movement, and by the way, it's a fantastic movement. You guys can totally do it if you like it. The only issue is that your lower back, your erector spinae muscles, and just your core overall is going to be the limiting factor. And oftentimes that will produce a ton of systemic fatigue, having to stabilize all these muscles here while you're rowing. And therefore, I think that it's way too much fatigue for how much stimulus you're getting. And it also is just very, very systemically fatiguing. And I feel like your low back is going to give out, because it's a lot. Your low back is typically not as strong as other muscles at the back, like your lats and stuff. They're much bigger muscles, much stronger muscles. So if you guys want to be building your erector spinae, or building your core, then this would be a fantastic exercise for that. But in terms of just overall hypertrophy, it's not going to be the best for the back, in my opinion. Now we could kind of mix this up a little bit, and you could do the single arm dumbbell row where you're like this, and then this is adding some stability to the movement. So this one, you're just going up and down like this, and I actually kind of protract and retract my scapular blades on this one. And if you're just keeping it stationary, you're going to be working the lats, but you're not going to be working the rhomboids as much. A lot of people make this mistake where they just keep it stationary. Well, I think that you should totally go down and up. And then that would be a great middle ground where you're still a little bit athletic. You're still getting a lot of a deep range of motion because you're in more of an athletic stance. However, I think we could take it even a step further. So the third tier on this list would be a chest supported variation, where you would be going like this. And this is the one that I want to do today. So you just be going like this, and then here you're getting the full range of motion, but you're not limited by how much your low back can lift. And I really like this because you're also using dumbbells, and dumbbells are a great way to get some individual stimulus on each side of your back musculature. So this is how I kind of approach this. And of course, this is all coming from a hypertrophy lens. You could if your primary goal is just like overall strength and stuff, then I'd probably do something like a barbell bent over row or something equivalent to that. But if your goal is hypertrophy, then I think that doing the variation where your chest is supported or doing like the unilateral variation is great. Of course, you don't only have to be doing a dumbbell variation. Like, you could transition all this thinking into a machine variation, a barbell, a dumbbell, whatever floats your boat. You know what I mean? Anyway, let's get into the first set here. Woo. Okay, this is a video about form, and I feel like my form could have been a little bit improved, but bear with me. Basically, my main aspiration there in terms of like the cues I was using is at the bottom, I was sinking all the way down, trying to get a stretch in my mid back and lats at the bottom range. And then at the top, I'm retracting, squeezing my shoulder blades together, squeezing my back together, and getting my elbows behind my body. I think that for any back movement, any compound back movement that is, you should use the cue of driving your elbow behind your body, because that's going to cause humeral extension, bringing the humerus behind the body. And then that's actually one of the primary functions of your back musculature, is just to squeeze together. Versus if you're using the cue of bring your hand behind your body or bring your hand up, then that's going to be more engaging biceps, because biceps, their primary function is elbow flexion. The higher you actually raise the incline up, and this goes for any back movement that's chest supported, the more your elbows are going to have to lead down to your sides, just based off of the arm path. Whenever you're working close to your sides like that, you're going to be engaging the lats a little bit more, versus when your elbows are further out, that's going to engage more of the mid traps, low traps, rhomboids, and all that stuff. Additionally, I'm a huge advocate for using straps on any back movement, whether it's a vertical pull, horizontal pull, whatever, because the last thing you want, in my opinion, at least for as far as hypertrophy is concerned, for your grip to give out before your back does. And it almost surely always will, because our backs are huge muscles. We only have these tiny muscles here in our forearm in order to grip and hold on to things. So if your grip's giving out before your back, then how are you ever going to hit failure on your back? So I think that straps are essential. I like to use a belt on movements that involve the core a lot, just so that the core doesn't give out before, which I still think it may be, if you're not careful. Next up, we're gonna talk about a different movement pattern entirely. This is actually a single joint or isolation lift. It's the straight arm lat pull down, and you could do this variation, or you could do the variation where your back is on a bench where you're doing the dumbbell pullover. That's also going to be the same type of movement pattern. And then you could totally, you don't have to do a rope, you could do a bar, any bar, and I encourage you guys to play around and see what suits your form best. But with this exercise, you want to keep your arms straight and just focus on using your lats. So getting that flexion and adduction. So by bringing your elbows down like this, you want to be able to feel that contraction at the bottom, and then you want a deep stretch at the top. So I really strongly discourage standing straight up and then bringing it down, because what are you doing there? You're limiting the range of motion of the lats and you're not getting that stretch, versus if you bend over and hinge at the hips, bend over, then you're going to be able to feel a great stretch in the lats. So that's the primary one. You can go like that, but when you have the rope all the way up, I like to be kind of like that 90-degree point, and that way you're going to feel it way more, in my opinion. Now you guys are totally free to do whatever you want, but I think that if your goal is hypertrophy, then this is the way to do it. And then of course you don't want to be swinging around. You really just want to be controlling it. And in this case, I like using a rope, because then you can kind of tuck your hands into your pockets here and get an even further range of motion and really initiate that contraction in the shortened position. In terms of exercise ordering, I know this video is all about form, but I think that they kind of complement each other, because if you want to get the best form that you possibly can, then you want your exercise ordering to be optimal. If it's not, if for say you start with something easier and then you end with like a barbell bent over row or a deadlift or something like that, do you really think that you're going to be able to keep your form pitch perfect towards the end? I don't think so. So that's why I'm kind of breaking it up here. I did a compound row lift to begin, and then now I'm doing an isolation lift, because this is less systemically fatiguing, and therefore I can kind of recover and recuperate myself a little bit before we get on to the next compound lift, which is going to be a vertical pull. With this one, you really want to make sure that your hips are in the same place. If you're using your hips to bring it down, it's kind of take away from your back in this movement. That's not what we want. You also want to keep your elbows in the same place. If you're flexing or extending your elbows, then you're going to be involving your arms. You may not even realize it, but you will be. And that's okay in something like vertical or horizontal pull, but since we're doing it in isolation lift, we really just want to be focusing on the lats. Okay, so I was originally going to get back into another compound lift, but since I'm already here, I'd like to demonstrate the proper form for rear delts as well. And this is a muscle that is often neglected, unfortunately, just because it's such a smaller muscle and people attribute it as, you know, a shoulder muscle, which it is. It is a deltoid muscle, but you're working your rear delts whenever you're doing any row or any any back movement. You're going to be working your rear delts at least to some degree. And the further up your elbows are, the more leverage the rear delts are going to have to bring back the arms and retract. So there are a couple exercises which I love personally. The first one is you could do this unilaterally or bilaterally, but it's just a rear delt fly with the cable. You could do this bent over like this, though I don't recommend that as much, because why not stand up if you can and try and remove the core kind of out of it. But with this, you're just going to keep your arms straight and then bring back your hand behind your body, and just make sure that you're bringing back your shoulder too, because that's what we're trying to work here. We're not trying to work the arm at all, really. So just work on bringing back your shoulder just like this. And I like to grab onto something for enhanced stability. Another thing is you want to be adducting the arm as far across the body as you possibly can. So see how I'm adducting it? So I'm all the way back and I'm abducting it for the rear delts. But by bringing the arm all the way across the body like this, you're actually going to be stretching the rear delt, which is what we want, right? Because that's going to produce more growth. Rear delts are one where we really want to keep our form rigid and really focus on working them. Okay, so that's one exercise you can do for the rear delts. Additionally, and I feel like this exercise is a little bit more popular, we could do some face pulls as well. And I like using the rope because then you get a further range of motion, versus if you're doing a bar, you're gonna be limited by wherever your face is. The rear delt is great, or the cable face pull is a great one because you can really load it up, versus the other ones, not so much. The only issue that I have is that we're not getting that full adduction of the arm. So that's a bummer, because then you don't get as deep of a stretch. My rear delts are burning. This is almost like a practice for the double biceps pose. All right, and then I just want to highlight again that you do not have to just do these exercises. You can do a dumbbell bent over fly. You could do a seated variation of that. You could do any sort of machine rear delt fly. So there's many different variations. You can even do like a seated cable high bar row where you're pulling all the way up here, and that's me working it a ton too, but that's gonna be more of a compound lift, of course. So, do with that information what you will, and I encourage you guys to play around, really use the form cues that I've laid out here, and see which one really resonates with you the most. Lastly, we come to the vertical pull section of today's session, and this could be, I'm doing a lat pull down with just the standard attachment, but you could mix up the attachments. You could do a machine vertical pull, you could do an assisted pull up, a banded pull up, a free weight pull up, a loaded pull up, just anything where you are pulling from above your head like this is going to be doing this similar movement pattern. And I do think that it is an essential movement pattern, because it's really going to be a compound lift for your lats. You could also do like a kneeling cable row, unilateral or bilateral, or you could like use a bench for some support or something. So, you know, you have options. So I'm going to keep this one pretty basic. The main form tips that I have are just to not use too much momentum, and then don't lean back too much. The further upright you are, the more lats you're going to be using, and then the further back you lean, the more like mid back and stuff is going to be emphasized as well. So I kind of like a 30-degree lean, because then you get a bunch of muscles in the back, but you also hit the lats to a maximum degree. Now you really just want to be controlling it and getting that full range of motion. And I do like to fully stretch out at the top just to get that weighted stretch component. So I'm kind of like hinging a little bit, but not too much. And then this goes for everything, but you want to be controlling the negative and exploding on the positive. So the concentric, explosion, eccentric, controlled. I think that you should be enabling as much of a range of motion as you possibly can. You see that I'm getting like 2 inches shy of touching my chest, but that's just because of my flexibility. But if you guys can go further, then please do. You want to be going as far down as you can. You really want to be controlling it. And the last thing that I like to discuss on any type of vertical pull is your hand position. I know that a lot of you probably have questions about that. And for the longest time, I wasn't sure exactly what to do. But after doing a little bit of anecdotal, like playing around with it myself and seeing how I feel about it, and then also doing some research, come to the conclusion that kind of a narrow grip is just better overall, because first of all, you get a way further stretch in a further range of motion for the lats, and it's also just better on your joints, in my opinion. So I think that doing a more narrow, like maybe slightly outside of shoulder width grip, is going to give you the best leverages possible and going to allow for the greatest range of motion and thus hypertrophy overall. But then a wider grip kind of reduces the range of motion, but you are kind of working this like outer portion of the lats just because of the angle of pull. So if you're like having issues with this portion of your lats or something, then you may want to try the wider grip. But overall, I think that a narrower grip is better for hypertrophy just because you get the enhanced range of motion. Yeah, so I don't do it. Yeah. But I also my headbutt. Yeah. So he's headbutting all night. I walked that whole fight. You're headbutting it the whole time. She goes, don't go around, goes around. Yeah, she's far. She's got all this front too. All right, guys, that's going to do it for today's specialized back form video. Today I talked about various different horizontal pulls, so rows. I talked about some which are more free weight style. I've talked about some where you're doing a unilateral, like a dumbbell unilateral bench row, and then why I think that for hypertrophy, a chest supported variation may be your best friend. I talked about how you really want to get protraction and retraction of the scapula, and how you should not be afraid to do that, and then how you may want to consider investing in some straps and maybe a belt. What else did I talk about? I talked about the straight arm lat pull down and variations of all these movements, by the way, and how the straight arm lat pull down is fantastic because it's a single joint exercise, and how you really want to be hinging really far at the hip so that you get a deep stretch of the lats at the top, and then you want to be keeping yourself pretty rigid. And then I talked about some rear delt exercises and how you want adduction of the arm as far out as you can so you get that deep stretch, and then some substitutions just if you want to play around, and encouragement on doing so. And then lastly, we talked about some vertical pulls, some variations for this, how you don't want to be swinging too much, how you kind of want to keep things tight and really focus on using your lats, and how you really want to emphasize that deep range of motion. So that's going to do it for today, and I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I hope that you took away something. If you have any suggestions for me on things that I may have missed, or things that I may be wrong about, or things that I can improve upon, please let me know. I would love that. Anyway, have a good one.